Hey guys, Chubbs here, back again with another Prodeus level editing tutorial, and today I'm going to show you all how to go about creating crushers. So I'll go ahead and show you all this basic map that I've set up for us. The crusher itself is nothing more than just a square brush that sort of goes up through the ceiling, and then behind the player start we have a button, and that's all there is to it. So the first thing that we're going to focus on is just the crusher's movement. And if you've watched my tutorial on lifts, then you're probably well aware that whenever you're moving brushes around, the best way to do that is to use what's called a mover. So let's go ahead and place a mover into our map here. So to do that, all you have to do is go up to Assets, the Asset Browser, double click the function category, scroll down until you see Mover, and then just hold down left click on it and drag it into your map. Now, unless you're going to be rotating your brush or unless you want to be playing some sort of a sound effect with the mover, the positioning of the mover itself is pretty much irrelevant, so you can put it anywhere you want. So I don't think I'm going to be using the mover for a sound effect. I think I may be playing some sound effects later on in this tutorial, but I'm probably just going to use a dedicated sound object to do that instead of the mover itself. So I'm not going to worry too much about the placement of this mover. I'm just going to sort of put it near the crusher, but the exact position of it is pretty irrelevant. So now that we have our mover in the map, the next thing we need to do is associate our crusher brush with the mover. And to do that, all you have to do is either double click the mover brush, or the crusher brush, which will open up the property inspector, or you can select the crusher brush and then go up to Windows and then click Inspector. So both of those do the same thing. Either way, whenever you get the property inspector pulled up, just left click on Select Parent and you'll sort of get this blue line, and then drag the line over to the mover and left click. And so we've now said that the crusher brush has the mover as its parent. And this allows us to move that brush using the mover object. So now that we have parented the mover to our brush, the next important step is we need to determine how far this crusher needs to move down before it has actually hit the floor. And since our crusher is sort of suspended here in the middle of the room, that makes it a little more difficult to measure because we don't have like a wall to measure or anything like that. So in cases like this, I recommend using the measure tool. So you can go up here to the toolbar and click on measure. It sort of looks like a ruler icon. Next, just go to anywhere here at the bottom of the crusher, hold down left click, and then point down towards the floor below it and hold the shift key. And when you hold down shift, it will sort of straighten it out perfectly. And that way you'll get an exact reading of the distance between the bottom of the crusher to the floor below it. And it may be tough to see because of YouTube's compression, but it's currently telling me that right now the exact distance between the crusher and the floor is about 3.5 or 3.50 units. So that's the value that we're going to need to enter in our mover object. So let's select our mover and let's go to movement delta, and this middle value here is the up and down movement. So since we're going to want to be moving the crusher down, we're going to enter a negative value. So I'm going to enter negative 3.50 since that's the value that we got from the ruler. And that should be perfect. That should make it so that the crusher goes right down to the floor, and then we can have it go right back up. Now at this point, if we were to activate this mover, it would just go down and stop. We want it to go down, and then as soon as it reaches the floor, go right back up and then repeat. So it's like on a cycle, just like the crushers in Doom. To do that, first we're going to go here to the mover and check repeat motion. And that should make it so that the motion cycles or repeats over and over. Next, at least for now, we want this crusher to be on by default just so we can test it. So I'm also going to check start on, and that way as soon as the map starts, the movement should be in movement should be in progress, and we can test it right away without having to flip a switch or do anything else. So let's go ahead and just run a quick test, make sure that the movement looks right, and then we'll move on to applying the damage. Alright, so as you can see there, we have that up and down crusher type motion that we want. So the next thing that we need to do is turn this into an actual crusher. Right now, if you were to step under it, it wouldn't hurt you at all. So we need to change that. In order to give this damage, we're going to use what's called a damage volume. So if you go up here to the toolbar, you can see this sort of sad face icon. If you click that, you can begin to draw out a volume. So I'm going to start drawing it here on the ground, and then we're going to raise it up to the crusher. So you don't have to be exact with your drawing right now. I'm just going to draw a sort of rectangle. We're going to change its dimensions here in just a second. And I'm going to make it just 0.25 in terms of its thickness. I want it to be a thin volume. So now that I've sort of drawn it out here, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move it up here to the base of the crusher. So let's go ahead and move it up. And if it seems like it's a little off, you can also do a grid alignment. You can hold down Control and Shift and then hit G, and that will snap to the grid. You might have to do that sometimes to get it just right. It might seem like it's off the grid. You may have to snap it back on. But what I found in my test is you don't want this to be the exact length of the crusher like this. We don't want it to be exactly as wide as it or as long as it. Instead, you want to scale back just a little bit like that, leave a little bit of room. What I found is if it's exactly as wide as the crusher, then it can still crush you if you like walk against the crusher when it's down, even if you aren't under it. So I recommend leaving just a little bit of buffer room, but we're going to go around here and just stretch this volume out so that it's sort of close to the dimensions of the crusher, but so that there's a little buffer room around the edges, just like I'm doing here. And it can be a little finicky in terms of getting it to be on the grid. I'm not real sure why that is, but you can see I'm having to sort of re-snap to the grid here to get it just right. And there we go. So you can see it surrounds the bottom of the crusher, and I've got just a small amount of buffer space around the edges so that it doesn't act like it's crushing us if it's already down against the ground and we walk up against the crusher, even if we're not underneath it. So now that we have that damage volume in place, we need to do two things. In its current state, this volume is going to be suspended up in the air at all times. It's not going to move with the crusher. So what we need to do is we need to parent this volume itself to the mover. That way, not only is the crusher brush moving, but the damage volume is moving as well. So select the damage volume, click Select Parent, and parent it to the mover. So now both the crusher brush and the damage volume are parented to that mover, and that means that they're both going to move in unison. Next, go back to the damage volume. We'll select Start On, and then the most important part is we'll select Is Crush Damage. So now it should have that crushing damage so that if you step underneath this thing and it's coming down on you, it's pretty much going to kill you right away. So that should be all we have to do for the damage and the crusher behavior. So let's go ahead and just run a quick test and let's see what we got. Alright, so as you could see, the movement was just right, and as soon as we stepped underneath that thing and it came down on us, it definitely crushed us, that's for sure. So that's really all there is to creating a crusher. You just give it a mover, and then you place the damage volume, make sure that you check Is Crush Damage and start it on, and then just parent it to the mover, and it does the crushing. So I'm also going to show you guys a couple other things, or I shouldn't say a couple. I think there's actually like 3 other things you might want to do to spice this up a little bit. And in order, they are a sound effect that plays whenever the crusher hits the bottom, a camera shake effect when it hits the bottom like it's pounding the ground, and then a particle effect with dust that kind of comes up. And that way you have like this nice presentation so that when the crusher hits the ground, it makes it seem like it's got like a really strong impact. So let's go ahead and let's do that real quick. We'll just do it in order. So we'll start with the sound effect. Let's go here to our asset library, go to function, scroll down until we see sound, and we'll sort of place this. I'm going to place it down near the bottom where I want the slam sound to be played, and you can play around with these ranges here to determine how far you want the sound to be heard from. I'm going to change it to we'll just try 5. I'm not sure what the exact distance really should be for this case, but I think this will be fine. And when it comes to slam sounds, I haven't found a whole lot that are perfect for that, but there is one that I kind of like. So if we go up to Assets and then Audio Browser, if you go to the Explosions category, one that I've sort of found that I like is Explosion Small 01. You can double click it to preview it. I'll go ahead and do that for you. So that's sort of a nice like slam sound. So while you have that selected here in the window, all you have to do is go over here to the audio properties while you have the sound object selected and click paste, and that will tell this audio object or this sound object to play that clip. So we don't need the audio window anymore. I'll go ahead and close it out. And we have the sound effect. Now what we need to do is play it. So that's really simple. We're just going to go up here to the mover. We're going to say when you have reached the end of your playhead, or basically whenever the crusher is at the very bottom, we want you to play the sound. So let's go ahead and just test it real quick, just make sure the sound effect works. Nice. So that was exactly what we were after. Next, let's go ahead and just add a camera shake to make it seem like it's really powerful, like it's shaking the entire room. So let's go to Function, Cam Shake. I'm just going to stick it here sort of near the middle. And you may have to play around with these values to get it exactly like you want. I'm going to try and sort of stick with most of the basic values. I might actually change the distance. Let's see. I guess I'll change the distance to 5 for the minimum distance and just see how that is. But it's really just the same process for setting up the sound effect. We're going to go up here to the mover. We're going to say when you're finished playing, or basically whenever the crushers hit the floor, activate the camera shake. And that should be all we need for that. So let's test it, make sure the camera shake works. All right, perfect. So last but certainly not least, let's go ahead and just add a nice little particle effect to make it seem like it's slamming the ground so hard it's bringing up a bunch of dust. So one of the particle effects that I like for this is if you go to Particles and then Dust, there's this Dust Ring Medium One Shot. This is not a loop, it's just a one-time effect, and this just makes it look like a bunch of dust is being brought up from the ground. It looks really nice for this, I think. So we'll go ahead and we'll put it there on the ground, and just like with both of these things, we'll just tie it up to our mover. So we'll go to the mover, we'll say when you've reached the end, activate that particle effect. So now let's try it, and our presentation should be mostly complete. Alright, so that is it. That's pretty much it for this tutorial. I am going to finish things off though with a nice little bonus. A crusher isn't very good if you don't have something to crush. So let's place an enemy here that we can kill. Actually, let's place several. Let's go to Entities, Monsters, Zombie. Let's just throw in a bunch of zombies. I'm actually going to make them spawn in. We're going to change this up a little bit. I'm going to rotate them so that they face the player. Let's place about 4 of these guys. Place one more. Make him face the player. I'm going to select all of them. We don't want them to start on. We do want them to use the spawn effect. And we're going to go to our mover. We don't want this to start on anymore. We're going to tie it to a button. So I'm going to uncheck start on. Let me also check our damage volume. Bring up the properties for it. Okay, so this is a problem here. I really should have addressed this earlier. If you want the crusher to hurt enemies, then you want to uncheck only damage player. Otherwise, the enemies are not going to be hurt by it. I really should have covered that earlier in the video. That was a mistake, so I apologize about that. But now that we have unchecked this, those zombies should be killed by the crusher. So last but not least, now that we have unchecked start on, let's make it so that the button is what starts the crusher. And we're also going to make it so that the button spawns these enemies. So when we've pressed this button, we want it so that the crusher begins and then those zombies come in, and that way they can walk towards us and get crushed. So let's go over here to the button. Let's go to its first output. We'll tell it to play the mover, which will start that cycle. And then we're just going to tell it to turn on these zombies, or basically spawn these zombies. There we go. So very simple logic. So now let's play our map. The crusher should not be on by default, but when we flip the switch, it will start. The zombies will spawn in, and then we'll lure them towards us and watch them get crushed. So here we go. Man, that was gruesome. Anyways, I think that just about does it. I really appreciate you guys watching. If you have any questions about this, feel free and ask below. I'm also going to go ahead and try and post this map in the video description. That way, if you want to load it up and look at it yourself, you can do that. But again, thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate it. This is Chubbs, signing out.